Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Vedic Astrology podcast. My name is Fiona Marks. I am joined once again today by my friend and colleague, Sachin Sharma.
Hello. Thank you for having me again.
Sachin, I've invited you back because we have so much to speak about in this episode about archetypes, avatars, and the planetary energies that it just couldn't fit all in one episode. So shall we dive right back in to our discussion? And we're talking about archetypes and we're talking about avatars.
When we understand the archetypes, the avatars from the context of Jyotisha, is that it becomes a journey from this random chaos of these imagistic emotional urges that are spontaneously arising and drowning one into unconsciousness. It's a journey from this state to a state of this orderly structure of these thematic tales, acts. It's like a leela, a play that allows one to derive wisdom, know one's script, understand one's role in the cosmic play, and come to terms with the fundamental nature of reality. So we dissolve certain resistances towards existence, becoming conscious of these instinctual archetypal themes, these primordial patterns, primordial representations, ultimately breaking free, liberating, getting this sort of psychological moksha, first and foremost, by understanding these themes. And this has to be assisted with your psychophysical, psychospiritual yogic practices, with an understanding of Jyotish. So it's a jnana of path. And you break free from chaos. You find yourself placed in this space-time where you're placed, regardless of good things happening to you, bad things happening to you. You understand where that's coming from, why the judgment is the way that it is within yourself. It's a perfect tool for analytic thought, for meta-analysis, metacognition, for Jungian analysis, because Jungian analysis works a lot with symbols, motifs, images, and these sort of things. And Jyotish really connects it, like really aligns, superimposes it, and then circumambulates, does this sort of parikrama with the psyche. And you see it from different angles. It's really profound that way. Now, how this is psychoanalytically relevant to us is that this tells us how anger is considered to be something that shouldn't be there. But anger is a part of your psychospiritual structure, Mars.
People can feel like anger is an undesirable state to be in.
Yeah.
And yet it is the power that has allowed our ancestors to survive until this point. Why I have DNA here is because of all of the anger, the power that my ancestors had to survive the various threats that humans face.
Yeah, just from each other. Even if two human beings are there, you just need that martial energy to keep another person's demons at bay. Because whenever demons see a capacity to invade, one of the very core things, psychology of thievery, kleptomania, is that because I saw a loophole. So that's the thing. And that's why you need to have, it's not to build walls, but to build fences. You can communicate, relate, but there's a fence. And there can even be a gate on the fence and you can invite the other person over. But to not have a fence can be a problem because they're two different structures, like two different chemicals that may or may not be good for each other. And building a wall is also bad because it creates total disconnection. So it's just the right amount of height. And Mars gives us that capacity to stay. And an uncultivated Mars is rage, frustration, breaks down, not knowing when to stop. There's cowardice. It doesn't know what to stand for and doesn't even know how to stand for something. It burns out. It applies more force than necessary. And it breaks the thing because it applied too much force, or doesn't apply enough force and is not able to push through, pull it off. So Mars is a very important capacity. So Mars becomes this indestructible energy if it's cultivated. It knows when to go fast, when to go slow. It has the capacity to transform, generating enough pressure within itself to work with that internal pressure and churning and move through that. Uncultivated Mars quits. It quits. It's moody. It's emotional. It changes from day to day. It can feel really disciplined today and not so disciplined 5 days ago. The key with Mars is reason, purpose, which is Jupiter. If you give Mars a proper purpose, an army with a purpose, an army with faith, which is Jupiter, goes a long way. There have been instances, so many instances, where armies with a purpose defeated armies far bigger than them. Alexander the Great, I think, has some of the biggest examples. And even when he reached Persia, there were like 10,000 people against 100,000 people. And they won because they were so driven by this sort of thing.
Even in this current Ukraine conflict, just on numbers, it seemed like, wow, that conflict will last a week because Russia's obviously got a lot more soldiers, a lot more resources, a lot more military equipment. And that hasn't been the case. It's really interesting. What you were saying there also, though, was making me think about why we say that Mars is debilitated in Cancer, because what you were talking about, that adaptability that Cancer has of going with the flow and always changing, which is such a strength, such a great thing to have. And yet for Mars, that doesn't work well.
Yeah, it doesn't work well. For a Mars in Cancer to work well, you need to really work on stabilizing the bone. The more regulated the person's hormones are, the more regulated the person is on a psychological level, the more therapized their psyche is, the better the Mars will function. But the Mars is in a ground which is not stable. So Mars is looking for stable ground, but it's just the waters. It's just like going, it has to constantly, what's it called, swim upwards.
Against the stream, yeah. Yeah. And isn't it interesting that Jupiter and Mars swap their debilitation and exaltation? Because you were just talking about how an army that has faith, Jupiter exalted in Cancer, and yet Mars exalted in Capricorn, where Jupiter struggles to find its hope. So it's really fascinating combination between those two signs and those two planets. And we have to remember that what I notice in charts all the time is that people who have Mars in Cancer get great Ayanabala, which is a very great blessing, right? Because Ayanabala is what helps us to know when to engage in conflict or not. And when you have it going very well in Cancer, at least which battles to fight. However, your approach and tactics might be challenged by the Cancer environment. But I think that of all of the exaltation, debilitation, that is a great inverted commas boon for Mars to have when it is in Cancer.
Because Moon and Mars are not fundamentally enemies. They are friendly towards each other in natural relationships of the planets. Obviously, other planets speak to Mars, so it needs to be guided by Jupiter. It needs all the other grahas. A well-cultivated Mars is patient, calm, protective, restrained, logical, surgical, solution-oriented, watchful, and knows when to fight and knows when to flee. So if you see a good fighter, they would know when it's not their fight. You would know when what's their fight, what's not their fight. They would know when to run away. And they would be okay with that. It wouldn't make them feel less or wouldn't hurt their ego. If I would have stayed, I would have probably not been alive. So it knows when to flee. It knows how to train. It's disciplined. This is a cultivated Mars. It knows how to remain focused on the agendas of Sun, because Mars is the army general. The Sun's, okay, we need to build this thing. So a good Mars stays and does it, fulfills the mission. It gets the job done. A bad Mars is unable to get the job done. So how to take commands from the Sun without feeling this sort of resistance to the Sun? Because army generals, they can be coup. Mars can have a coup against the Sun and destroy the government, and there's anarchy. There's no replacement after the coup. You never see a coup work out because there's no other Sun. Either the Mars becomes the Sun which is a very transformative process. Can happen, I don't know, maybe it's true, but usually coups lead to no replacement of the government and there's just a fallen state unless another leader shows up and takes over and stuff.
In Portugal, it was a dictatorship here in Portugal up to 1974. So that's very recent. Like I was alive in 1974. So that's like in my lifetime. And the revolution actually happened at the level of the captains. So it turned out I wasn't living here, so I'm being liberal with my understanding as a foreigner, but that we see that leaders get absorbed by power. And the sun mythology is really helpful for that. And we covered that in a previous episode, but one day maybe Sachin and I will also cover that. But it's a weakness, isn't it? That when one is in power, one can get consumed by that and you want to hold on to it. And this had actually seeped down to that level of the generals, that they were all in cahoots with the leader. We hold on to what we have. And so this revolution happened at that soldier level, which I think shares something about that Mars energy, that they just know what's right and wrong. They know what they've been trained to do. They know that they're supposed to be protecting the innocent and the meek, and they can begin to see through this power thing that's deluded that upper level. And so the revolution happened from the captain level down. They came into the city, and within the morning, they had achieved their purpose. And there was some firing of gunshots, but no one was actually killed on the day. Nobody was shot on the day. So it was a very clean Martian thing.
That's a very good point about sometimes sun can become a tyrant, and then you need the rebelliousness of Mars to temper the sun a little bit.
They executed it, like I say, very effectively. And then, of course, in a good Martian way, they handed back power to the people. And there was a time it was quite turbulent. So it took time to settle into a democracy after that. There were many elections, and it took a while for that maturity to come to know how to manage a country democratically after such a long dictatorship, and before that, a monarchy. But what I also wanted to point out was that I think that demonstrates that Martian quality, that when my job is done, I step back, and that's exactly what they did. They were not operating to install a particular leader. They were just operating for the righteous purpose of protecting the weak. But what I wanted to point out was that after this event, the main captain struggled to find that role in life in Portugal. And it has some of this theme of the way that we hero worship warriors. But then after the battle is done, what does one do with that hero worship? And this person, I believe, did not want to get drawn back into politics in any way. And that was seen as not good. And his reputation was tarnished. And he went through a period of time where he was really ostracized or not venerated. And now as time moves on, some 50 years later, actually his star is really rising and he's seen for the good deeds that he did do. But I think this is an interesting thing, isn't it? Then transition of Mars from action to repose. When we did the Mars episode, I actually ended up calling it Mars and the Marginalized, I think, because just noticing how important Mars energy is for people who are marginalized, that is, people who don't have power, right? So whether it's children or women or people of different races, those are the people that are not playing in the game of power as equally and fairly as other people. But part of what's inspiring from that perspective is that Mars has no parents. In the various mythology of Mars, it's not coming from a mother and a father. Like in this case, Mars bursts out of a pillar.
Yeah.
And then Mars is released when he's done his auspicious work. It's time for Mars to dissolve, retreat, go back. And then Mars finding one's place after it has successfully completed the deed. Where does Mars belong after that? And we have all of those experiences in our culture around where do veterans fit in once they've participated in a battleground, they've fought on the winning side or the losing side, how do they come back to their city, their town, their village and be integrated? And it seems that both the creation of Mars and this after effect of Mars, there's a little bit of where do I belong? I don't have parents, so I have to, my identity or my lineage is not established by my bloodline. And then where do I belong after? What are your thoughts about this part of the archetype? Mars before and Mars after the event?
There's no Mars after or before. There's just Mars and there is no Mars. The archetypal theme with Mars, primarily the predominant theme is innocence, protection of innocence, saving a devotee, saving someone who has faith in and is experientially good in that way, and blessing those that stick to their word. So with Mars, there's always a strength of character theme, sattvam, which is a word used by Parashara for Mars, sattvam. So there's a theme with Mars of sattvam, strength of character, which Prahlad showed, and devotion and protection of those who can't protect themselves. That is first and foremost ourself. If someone feels victimized by reality itself, Jyotish can bring one to an understanding that reality is what it is. It's fair and square. But Mars, when it's fighting outer battles, it turns into an activist. What do I stand for? What do I stand against outside of myself? Ultimately, what's my fight to fight? What's the proper way? Uncultivated Mars is a victim of reality. Ultimately, Mars gives you this feeling of rage, and then you need to deliver justice. And that can look like a huge transformation within yourself. It can't be changing reality. When Mars tries to change outside world, it always dies frustrated. It dies with a lot of pent-up pain and sorrow. So our job is to take care of ourselves.
So if we identify with our role as a warrior after the event, that's when it's not functioning well, because that identity doesn't need to exist after the event.
We have to understand that we have all the 9 avatars active within us. Ultimately, all 9 archetypes have to function in the best capacity. We don't want a Narasimha which the pillar never split open. And Prahlad is left confused, and Hiranyakashipu was like, see, now it is what it is. Now either I kill you or you go join the demon school and finish your lessons. That wouldn't be good.
And it wouldn't be good if the Lion Man stayed angry forever. As a force for good, as an auspicious, righteous pet, it has to live.
That's the critical part of the tale. That's a good point, because then Prahlad has tears of devotion and Narasimha calms down. So we actually have different forms. Bhadra Narasimha, which is fierce aspect of Narasimha, Jwala, flames, Veera Narasimha, Krodha Narasimha, angry, Guha Narasimha, concealed Narasimha. So this would be more scorpionic. So these are inner warriors, people who are on a spiritual war. That's the Scorpio aspect of things. Yogananda Narasimha, peaceful Narasimha, teaching yoga. So there's a peaceful Narasimha. So you can see people with really strong Mars influences being really peaceful. Why is that the case? Because they don't pick random battles.
They're our personal trainers who are helping us with our daily exercise regime to get fit or whatever. So they're using all of those discipline and auspicious goals, but
that's a perfect one. That's a very good one that you said. Yeah, the personal trainers. Yeah. We see that like when wars finish, army generals are just uselessly sitting around playing cards, over drinking, and there's a war, and everyone suddenly, even if they're unfit, they can get a lot done. That's a very good point. That's one, and then you need Jupiter, that realignment of purpose, that sort of opening up the path. So one of the interesting things could be interaction of Jupiter, Vaman, and Narsimha. But in Narsimha theme, we don't see, like, after Narsimha leaves, we don't see Narsimha being sad and purposeless. So with that archetypal theme, we don't see. But yeah, in and of itself as a martial theme, that's a very good point and a very good example you gave, that yes, after wars, now I understand what you meant by post-war, like post-episode and pre-episode. Like, I understand what it means that Mars, when it's doesn't have anything to fight for, it starts to die off. It sort of like really loses its fire. So if fire element is weak in the body, your hunger goes away. You start feeling, you can start having water retention or start losing a lot of weight, and you need that element to come back. So when people feel hungrier, they're also hungry for life. It's your energy in your body that helps you exert your will, your vision. But if your energy in your body doesn't work for you, when you have an energetic breakdown, if you drink 15 cups of coffee and you just are vibrating and just buzzing and falling on the floor and sweating and having almost like a panic attack, then you wouldn't be able to fulfill Sun's vision. And you'll need rest and care and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm thinking about how we hero worship, that these people do heroic deeds, and we as a society put them then up on a pedestal. But that's not a place that Mars ever wants to be.
Yeah. That's a good point again. That's true.
And then you get lots of problem with fallen heroes, right? The people who did do a great deed in that action, in the battle.
Yeah.
And then post the battle, we put them on a pedestal. And as you say, they're almost debilitated then, because they've got no enemy, they've got nothing to do. We see them at their worst, perhaps indulging in something that's not good for their body, like drinking or whatever it is, without a purpose. And then we question our heroes.
So that's where the principles and methods of Jyotish make the archetypes like a theme. Like, why did this person in their exalted Mars Dasha did so much in the war, and after Mars comes Rahu Dasha. In their Rahu Dasha, suddenly there was identity crises because they have Sun or Rahu or Moon Rahu conjunction of some sort in a certain placement. And they're like trying to figure out who they are, or they're trying to manifest a new person. But their Mars is at odds from all the PTSD from the war. So that's when Moon needs to be worked at.
You've just blown my mind that Rahu Dasha comes after Mars Dasha. If we put our heroes on pedestals, the next thing we're going to see is them going through their most lost period.
Yeah. But Rahu is not necessarily always lost, but yes, definitely it gives you an opportunity for new exploration, and some seafarers discover new lands, and some ships sink, and then they're given another chance. And one thing is, Narsimha quickly shows up, navigates through the boon, fixes, and leaves. That's very Mars's job is not to stay active all the time. It's like a cheetah. It can run really fast, but it can run really fast for a short duration. That's Aries aspect of Mars. There's a scorpionic aspect to Mars, which is more long-term calculative. It's more transformative, disciplined.
And there's the altered Capricorn element of Mars as well, isn't there? That this boon is sounds watertight. When you hear it, you're like, you didn't give him mortality, but you're pretty much guaranteed this guy is not going to die. And I think Mars in Capricorn is just ingenious with its logic. What have I got? What can I use? And it can solve any problem. And I think this is also a little bit comes from Scorpio, doesn't it? That Mars is whatever that obstacle is, even if it's deeply psychological, the Shakti of Mars is going to navigate through that. What a gift to have.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
The Shakti of Mars. Yeah. And then I think part of what you're sharing with us is that the boon that the demon had that seems so watertight can be overcome. That's what this story tells us, that there's always a way, and Mars is that energy.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's always a way. That's the key with Mars. There's always a solution. A good Mars, a well-cultivated Mars realizes that there's a way. There has to be a way. There's got to be a better way. That's what they say. There's got to be a better way. There has to be a solution to this. And a good Mars just doesn't get frustrated and doesn't quit.
Then I'm also being inspired that as an astrologer, sometimes that's our role, or the gift that an astrologer has is that the birth chart map can show kind of those conditions, can't they? Can't be at this time and that time, can't be on this planet or this location, can't be on this age group, can't be with this person or that person. And a client coming to us can feel a little overwhelmed or defeated that the structure of the chart is such that it seems like there's no way through there. But then the advantage of seeing the astrologer is that the map is laid out. And so the astrologer can use her ingenuity, can use her Mars to have that perspective. There is a way through this. That's what the astrologer goes in with, and then can help guide in co-creation with the client a pathway through that.
Exactly. That's the thing. If astrology feels like a defeatist philosophy, then the astrology in and of itself doesn't have a philosophy. Astrology is just the astronomy of space, time, and self. It's the structure of reality. It has no philosophy. It just is. It's just fire will burn the wood. How can you be in resistance or for or against that? And the structure of astrology in and of itself allows for change, because that's one of the tenets in Hinduism, that there's constant ayana, there's constant movement. We're in constant gochar. The gochara, the transit, is all about movement and transition and transformation. So any astrologer who says life is 100% fated is philosophically misaligned. That's why argumentation, proper debate, and proper clarity and grounding Jyotisha in a proper philosophy is very important, because the personal equation, which I spoke about in an interview with Ryan Kozak, and anyone who hasn't heard that can hear that on YouTube. The personal equation of the astrologer is really important. So if you want a defeatist attitude, then you subscribe to that kind of astrologer. If you want this sort of empowerment, because astrology's structure inherently is, there's a 8th house, a house for change. There's a period within time when planets go through 8th house and create changes. The code of this solar system, the coding, it has a built-in function for transformation, enhancement, change. And sun is the free will. Moon is the fate. All habitual, instinctual stuff grounded in Rahu and Ketu and Moon are all things that are fated. The more lunar we are, the more fate is powerful. The less control we have. The more solar we are, the more we are grounded in awareness and self, or Atman or Chitta or whatever you want to call it, to whatever degree, not enlightened spiritual degree, just grounded in your own heart, the more you'll feel there's will. You can will things. Tomorrow I'm going to wake up at 6 and I'm going to do this. But if you're a lunar person, you would say it and you wouldn't be able to wake up because you're feeling so low and you're feeling drained, you're energetically not okay and things are not fine, and you couldn't sleep until really late because your hormones or circadian rhythms weren't working for you. Good sun-moon rhythms are very important. And that's why a lot of astrological work is a work on the level of Ayurveda. Ayurveda, yoga, Jyotish and Vastu all speak to each other. That's what was taught in schools thousands of years ago. You're going to be alive, you're a consciousness, and you're in the space-time. Let's learn about the space-time. You need to understand space. That's Vastu. If you have a body and you're going to fall sick and there's all these elements and doshas working with you, you need to take care of your health. And then you need moksha. You need to first be fully embodied. So you do these physical asanas and to feel psychosomatically at ease. along with that, you get into yogic things. So this was what was taught. And now we're taught we are glorifying evil kings. We call Alexander as the Great. There's nothing great about Alexander. We glorify these things. And this is what's super interesting about archetypology, if I may, is that an evil, dysfunctional, uncultivated Mars will play out the Narasimha theme in a dysfunctional manner. So there will be moments that you couldn't enter and protect the innocent within you or someone else. Uncultivated, deranged energy of Mars can create perversions which feed off of taking away other people's innocence. It gets a kick on that. So that's a perverted Mars where you like it when you steal away the innocence. So this is something to do with shadow work using topology and Jyotish. And this is the shadow work domain. And this is extremely important and interesting research. So anyone who wants to engage in this sort of research can definitely get in touch with me on jungianastrology.com.
Keeping our answer general so that nobody freaks out about the Mars in their chart. An uncultivated Mars and the shadow work that you're speaking of, which I find really insightful, that the Mars shadow work is around stealing someone's innocence. Is that uncultivated Mars, do you think that's a legit avashta? Do you think it's Mars in a difficult place in the chart? Do you think it's aspects or conjunctions? And I don't want you to name any particular example because we don't want a whole lot of people saying, but I've got Mars in my fourth house expected by this. But if you have any thoughts about an uncultivated Mars, would you like to say anything general about that?
I think, yes, Lajjatari avast with Mars can have an effect, but ultimately you can work on your sun and moon. There's something to do with moon's perceptions with that element. The element itself can get distorted. Like for Mars, if it's fire element in your body, then it can have a certain perversion to it. In Taoist schools, poisoning of the internal fire, there's a Chinese word for it. In Mandarin, there's a word for it in Taoist alchemy, and they use the word perverted for that in their language. So you have to protect it within yourself first, because what you give, you have. What you don't have, you can't give. It's a metaphysical fact. You can't make another smile if you're not smiling. If you're angry, you cannot give happiness. You can give anger, you can give insight, you can defend yourself. But what you are, you can give. What's important is that the way that Avatara is being expressed, how that purpose of establishing dharma and destroying evil is fulfilled, is expressed through the graha. The story of the Avatara is in alignment with the qualities of the graha. So Rishi Parashar is touching at a very beautiful thing. It's so profound. Basically, Avataras is what the idea of archetype has been, what the European scholars or the priests of ancient times were trying to get at, and what Jung theorized and built further. So Parashar tells us that there are full avatars, which are full Paramatman consciousness, which is Sun, Moon, Rama, Krishna, and Varaha, believe it or not, Rahu. That's so fascinating. That blows my mind. And then it says Matsya has a lot of Paramatman, but it's not full Paramatman. It has Jiva consciousness, which you can see because it's a fish. The philosophical presupposition of Hinduism is liberation. Moksha. That's the philosophical presupposition. Everything assumes that the final goal is moksha. Whether it's Ayurveda, Vastu, any discipline, any Shastra, it's moksha. Be it any martial arts, this, that. It can be physical moksha with physical practices. It can be psychological mokshas, and then ultimately spiritual moksha.
And so then are the planets, are they archetypes?
The planets have archetypes. Planets are energies. They are elements. This idea in archetypal astrology that planets are archetypes is not true. This is just 10 sutras from the entire discourse on grahas. 10 sutras were devoted to avatars, archetypal themes, and archetypes. So the difference between Jungian Jyotish and archetypal astrology, the key difference is that archetypal astrology sees the planets as archetypes and grounds all of its theories in Mars archetype. And it's Pluto archetype. I don't know how the Western astrologers try to make sense of this. I've beat my head around this a lot for many years. It makes no sense to me. So in Jyotish, in Jungian Jyotish, avatars and archetypes are a part of the system of the planets. So planets are also expressed as the kingdom. They're also expressed as grains, weathers, different parts of time. And so all these things are depicted as different themes. And for psychoanalytic work, the avatara theme becomes really important. But planets, graha is not an archetype. It's not an avatar. An avatar is being birthed through a graha. It's expressing graha-ness of that graha, the qualities and characteristics of that graha. Graha means that which seizes. It just means seizes. Possessors possess what? Liberation, moksha from what? Of what? Liberation of the sun from the graha system, from the solar system. Liberation of the self from the solar system is what we are seeking to do in yoga.
Talk to me more about that. Being liberated from what?
It's like you were looking at the pillow and it's my pillow. To the point if someone hits the pillow, you feel hurt. So your sun is radiating its light out onto the pillow and your moon became attached to the pillow. And now if someone sets the pillow on fire, you are getting disturbed to the point of losing yourself, sense of self. So getting liberated from that thing but it's an actual experience. The self-realization is realization of you at the center of the solar system. But the journey, it creates a Panchamahabhuta Shodhana, which is cleansing of the 5 elements, which is a very clearly defined practice in Taoist alchemy, which is also a very Ayurvedic practice. Kriya Yoga is one of them, what Ryan teaches. So Kriya Yoga is very transformative that way. It works with the element and liberates you into your sense of self. So you feel liberated from the solar system and its pressures. Then the spiritual journey begins after self-realization. So when your self becomes self-realized, when you clean the psycho-imagistic contents, which is all these spontaneously arising images, feelings, memories in your psyche when you sit for meditation, when you clean yourself off that and you constantly clean and you come to subtler, it's just cleaning the slate. It's just cleaning the window to the point that sun can shine through. There's just the moon becomes so calm that when you look into the lake of the moon, you realize it's the sun. Sun can see its own reflection and realize itself. Right now, sun is looking at the lake, but the lake has so much movement that the sun cannot see itself. It can just see splintered orbs of light within the lake and just identifying with and trying to figure it out. And then there are these objects of shadows and which come out from the bottom of the lake, which is Rahu and Ketu, and pull you down. And then you use these 5 elements to figure out life as you're pushed and pulled. And then we have a sun which we don't pay attention to at all. That's yoga. That's where we need to figure out, not physical yoga, but sitting still yoga. Stilling the mind, stilling the moon yoga.
Delicious. Thank you, Sachin. We have so covered some territory today. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, your research, your passions. I've really gained a lot. I think it's something I'm going to keep digesting for many days after our conversation. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much. Your line of questioning and your curiosity and your own understanding and insights of astrology just add so much. It brings out the best in me, and it's just such a good feedback loop between you and a perfect flow. Thank you so much for doing this, for making this effort. Thank you.
Thanks also everyone for listening, and I look forward to the next time that we have Sachin Sharma join us on the Vedic Astrology podcast. Bye everybody.